Welcome, everyone, to the L7C Podcast NBA Playoff Edition. Today, we are talking NBA playoffs, reviewing the first round and previewing the second round. And we have our basketball expert, Evan Debo, with us. How are you doing today, sir?
Good, Martin. How are you doing, man?
I am doing well. I've been watching every game my body allows me to because, we're on the East Coast, so those 10:30 games are stretches. But if they're do or die games, I am up the whole way, but I've been enjoying being able to watch good basketball every day of the week, basically. I love it.
It's been rough trying to stay up for those West Coast ones for sure, man.
Thank God for ABC Sundays where they can be put at 3:30 in the afternoon. Love it, love it, love it. So today we're going to be reviewing the first round. We're going to see how good me and Evan did with some of our picks there. Then we're going to be previewing the second round where 2 games have already been underway and 2 more will be today. So Evan, first off, before we start going individual series in the first round, did you find the first round enjoyable this year?
Yeah, I definitely did. Even the series that were blowouts by all extent. So either a sweep or a 4-1 setting. I learned a lot about where each team was, which was really enjoyable. We'll touch base on the Bucks here in a second, but just seeing, what they were able to do in dismantling the Heat as opposed to them getting dismantled a year ago. I loved watching those matchups. I loved seeing the amount of 3-point shooting that they had come through and just how they were able to really make Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo work for it. And they struggled in that series a lot just with how Milwaukee had upgraded, not just Drew Holiday, but again, the shooting and, adding in Bobby Portis and some of those guys. You can say that for all of these series for me. I found it enjoyable. I was that kind of same thing where I learned a lot about strengths and deficiencies of the teams that advance and, what the teams that lost, need in order to progress into, the next stage in their development to try to win an NBA title, what pieces they might need and what have you. And it was great.
Oh, I agree. But since you brought up the Bucks, let's make that be the first series we actually review, because on our previous one, our previews, both you and I said this one could go the distance. We thought this could go 7. We both said 7. We both picked the Bucks. We were both right. The Bucks did advance, but it did not go 7 like you said. They clean swept them, which, to be honest, this was one of the shockers in the first round for me because I did not see a sweep coming in this. Did you?
No, outside of, we thought this was going to be, just based on last year, we thought this was going to be a struggle for Milwaukee, but they ended up pulling it out. But, with the exception of, game 1 where Duncan Robinson just lit up from 3 to start. And then, Milwaukee with that game winner in overtime, with the exception of that, every single game was a blowout. It was a blowout, but it was a blowout. I think the minimum score difference in all these games was the last one, which was 17. Milwaukee won by at least 17 in the other 3 games. So, it was, again, I touched base, I think, on a lot of the things that they added, the 3-point shooting, you name it. It was Brent Forms was phenomenal coming off the bench. He and Bobby Portis are just lethal from 3. That was a struggle for Miami. Bam really struggled. I don't even think Giannis had that great of a series. As crazy as that is to say, he averaged 23.5, 15, and almost 15 rebounds, which is insane, and assists. But he wasn't all that efficient as he could have been. He still did the Giannis thing where he settles, and you're like, dude, why are you still taking 3-pointers? Like, don't do that. You're hurting your team and hurting possessions. And then obviously the foul line struggles, and then what everybody's been clamoring for all season of, this dude's taking more than 10 seconds at the line. They finally called it. With all that being said, they were so impressive, man. They could switch, you name it, just the length. As we mentioned too, they were utilizing Brook Lopez a lot, and he was phenomenal in the paint. Again, he's progressively been going from Splash Mountain out behind the arc and working into closer and closer shots and really taking advantage of his size, whereas the league's kind of really spaced out. He's like, oh yeah, I'm kind of like 7'2". So and a big physical presence. So, I mean, they were just fantastic all the way around. Kudos to the Bucks, who really laid the wood to Miami in this series. And, Miami, for them, they had some struggles throughout the year, and everybody thought they'd be able just kind of to flip the switch and turn it on. And they didn't. I think you saw that, they really missed not having, a guy like Jay Crowder is another guy who can kind of switch defensively and take up fouls and things of that nature. Tyler Hero,
he did not
wasn't bubble Tyler Hero by any means. Again, it's just kudos to Milwaukee. They knew what they needed to do to get over the hurdle. They addressed that in the offseason and with some trades and stuff like that. And that's the result of very surprising, as both of us said, 4-0 sweep.
I think what you said on the last podcast was very telling about Milwaukee. When you said about how they improved their bench, you have a guy like PJ Tucker coming off the bench, and then someone who actually got some run time because DiVincenzo got hurt, Jeff Teague. And for people who remember the old Atlanta Hawk days or things like that, Jeff Teague can play. And so just seeing him, it was the game 4 that I saw him make some shots, and I was just like, wow, you were really caught it on their bench over there. And then Miami, which I guess almost the same thing I'll say with LA. I don't want to blame the shortened rest that they got, but they did only get 72 days rest off season wise. So we don't know the tolls that had on their bodies from finals, 72-day break, then back into the season. But they were not the same Miami Heat team that they were in the bubble. And obviously they got Victor Debo, but he didn't play. But where do you think Miami goes from here in the off season to get back into Eastern Conference Finals contention?
I think for Miami, they really need, every team can use one of these. So it seems trivial to say they need a playmaking wing. But I really think they do. I mean, Jimmy's very slow things up, get people set in a half court offense. But in terms of pushing the ball and setting up your teammates, you've got Dragic who's getting up there in age, and that's really it. You've got, of course, just an army of shooters and Ariza and Robinson and Hero, and even, shout out for Pat Riley, snagging Dwayne Dedman off the scrap heap too. That guy provided some really good minutes, and he can step out. You got Kendrick Nunn too, Kendrick Nunn's more of kind of a, by all accounts, kind of a Colin Sexton type guard that, you want to put in that point guard mold, that he's just more of a scorer. And just how more of a slashing 2 guard as opposed to a shooting, distributing 1. So I think they could use probably just another wing playmaker. I think, again, that's not Trevor Ariza. That's not Duncan Robinson. Again, they've got size. Andre Iguodala, he played 26 minutes in the finale, but they knew that when they acquired him last year that was kind of on borrowed time as a guy who's definitely on the latter part of his career. He's not going to be the Andre Iguodala of old by any means. But again, they had, I really like the Precious Achiuwa pick this past year, and he'll continue to develop. But that's where I think they can use. And again, just another year under Hero's belt and Robinson's belt and Adebayo's belt. Some of those guys, and they'll be right back in there.
Yeah, no, I agree. And they get to go home, and Milwaukee gets to move on, and we'll talk about their second round matchup in a little bit. There was another series in the East that me and you were completely wrong about, and that was the Atlanta Hawks and we're going to adopt them, our New York Knicks. We both wanted the Knicks to come out of this, but like we said on the previous podcast, if you guys haven't watched basketball and you got to see Trae Young for the first time on national TV, NBA world, basketball world, meet Trae Young. He told us not going to happen. And Atlanta won this in 5 and really could have won this in 4. What did you think about the young Atlanta team and Trae Young and most improved player Julius Randle really struggled in this series? And it was almost like the old Chicago Bulls teams where it was Thibodeau and Derrick Rose doing everything, and then no one else did anything. What did you think about that series?
There are a lot of things there. Again, I can't understate. I think, 90% of why I was so excited about the Knicks were, again, just the fan base. I mean, one of the best fan bases in all of sports. And when they're loud, they let you hear it. They let Trey hear it about his hairline. They let him hear it with a 4-letter word attached to his name in a chant. Like, it just, again, I said it before, I'll say it again. New York Knicks basketball that's good is good for the league. So that was really, really great to see. But you're right. I mean, it was kind of, let's remix the Chicago Bulls a little bit. And again, I mean, New York hadn't been to the playoffs in forever. So, I mean, I don't want to undermine the fact that they got bounced in the first round, what have you. I mean, RJ Barrett, those guys will continue to develop. Like we said, I mean, Julius Randle, I mean, really struggled. He still averaged 18 a game in the 5-game series, but guy just was horribly inefficient. I mean, some of his kind of herky-jerky, fadeaway shots inside 16 and baseline, stuff like that weren't falling, what have you. And Trae Young just went out there and had himself a series. I mean, that was really the difference. And I mean, there's a lot of folks that, probably myself included, that aren't big Trae Young fans, I think, to an extent. Like he's definitely kind of more, I think, in how he approaches the game, he's definitely more kind of like, honestly, a James Harden than he is a Steph Curry to me. Because I mean, just the way he plays the officials, and which is an aspect of the game. I mean, like just the foul drawing, the jumping backwards into a trailing defender to get to the line, like as a tactic, as opposed to just, straight taking shots and making or missing. Like, I get that that's a perspective, but I mean, this guy was unbelievable. Bogdanovich was unbelievable. And again, just more of, I mean, Clint Capella, that guy was honestly, I mean, he out-rebounded every one of the New York Knicks. I mean, the Knicks really were hurting, keeping him off the boards. That led to second possessions by the Hawks. Just to, again, just sling it from three, as they've got, Danilo Gallinari and all those guys. Trae on the series, 29 and almost 10 assists. I mean, Atlanta was really, really, really good. Cannot be understated, just the kind of job that Nate McMillan's done since taking over for Pierce. But I mean, that's a veteran guy who's been in the trenches with Indiana and Portland and a couple other things. And I mean, they're one of the top teams of basketball record-wise since Nate McMillan took over, and we saw it on full display in that 4-1 series. Martin, what did you see in the series?
Besides Trey, my biggest thing was Julius, because we also both said the way that the Knicks got to the playoffs and all of that he was definitely a top 5-6 MVP like candidate that we put down there, which still regular season, rightfully so. But when we got to this series, like the stats that I have on him is that he was shooting like 29% from the field. Like that's not going to cut it. And like shooting 33% from three, he did shoot 85 from the line. But like you said, he still averaged 18, but it was a very inefficient 18 points per game. So that was one of those biggest things too that I saw. And also how Trae Young, they have a lot of shooters. And if people didn't, like you already said, like Boban, Gallinari, like obviously Lou Williams, one of our people, but like, then they also have players who play like.
And Lou didn't even play too much either. I mean, in the finale, he only played 6 minutes, and they did this.
Yeah, it's like, wow. Then you already said quick. They are actually a put together team. Like when you actually look at the names and how they play, and it just felt like they could do whatever they wanted. And besides game 3, where Derrick Rose was the leading scorer with 30. Every other game, Trae Young was the leading scorer and Clint Capella was the leading rebounder. So it's like if you have the leading scorer, leading rebounder of the game, and there's not really that much you can do. And like you said, I don't want to crap on New York because they've not been in the playoffs in forever, but I expected this series to go a little bit longer, 6-7. I did not expect it to go 5, with Trae Young taking a bow after the deep 3. But man, Sky could potentially be the limit for Atlanta if they can keep the pieces and keep improving.
Yeah, I mean, even that. I mean, Trae wasn't all that efficient. He played 41 minutes. I mean, but again, when you just kind of volume shoot like he does, and get to the line as much as he does, I mean, he had of his 36 in the closeout game, 13 of those came from the foul line. Again, just tells you how much. I mean, he plays efficient. I mean, it's very much. He was actually horrendous shooting the ball. He was 10 of 28. I mean, that was bad, but he took 38. So he was 10 of 28. Not 38. That would have been really, really bad. But 10 of 28, which is only 35%. But I mean, he struggled shooting the ball. But again, the guy is so tactful in how he gets to the line. I mean, I see a lot of they're longer and they play defense way better. But I see a lot of like 17, 18 Rockets in this team.
Good call.
I do. I mean, and you've got, maybe I'm just making the comparison because you got Capella and then you've just got kind of the ISO 3-point threat and just distribution machine and for the comps. But I mean, again, they've got guys who can just launch it. Okongwu had some good backup big minutes in there too. The rookie out of USC. Again, I was kind of trying to talk myself into if the Cavs ended up drafting him a year ago because he was in contention. But you name it, from Solomon Hill to Kevin Huerter to even John Collins and Bogdan Bogdanovic. I mean, they can light it up from wherever. I get a lot of Rockets vibes from this team, and this could be a team that gets on a little bit of a roll here and can advance to the finals, the Eastern Finals. So,
no, yeah, that's a good call on you comparing them to the 17-18 Rockets team. I think the only, obviously, coaching-wise, Nate McMillan is a more defensive philosophy.
Yeah.
And besides D'Antoni, who is not a defensive-minded coach. But yeah, those two series, we were a little bit off the mark. But let's go to some series that we actually were exactly on the mark. The Brooklyn Nets over the Boston Celtics, 4-1. We both said that one game would be the max that Boston would get, and they did get that one on a 50 ball from Jason Tatum, but this was pretty clear cut, dry. Like watching the three, Durant, Harden, Kyrie, Joe Harris, all of them play together. They are an extremely dangerous team. Evan, what did you see in the Boston and Brooklyn series? And obviously, we have some stuff to talk about with Boston, so we'll throw that in there as well. So what did you see in that?
Yeah, I mean, going into this, I was really worried about Boston's depth. I think that they didn't have bodies, and we knew that it was going to be kind of like we talked about with Steph Curry. It's just one guy and how far he can take him. I mean, Jason with if you include the play-in game, his second 50 piece, in 6 games, it was amazing. They were able to steal that 1-by-6, against Brooklyn. But again, they just didn't have the firepower. And who does have the firepower? I mean, I think I said when this trade happened many podcasts ago, and I still hold that, I think this is Brooklyn's year. Again, just even if you catch one on your bad night, catch one of them on a bad night, you still got the other two to contend with. And I mean, the way, Blake Griffin's been playing lately and stuff too. I mean, and Bruce Brown, I mean, it's just like almost inevitable. It's just juggernaut type mentality. But, for the Celtics, again, Tatum was phenomenal in the series, had averaged 30.5, 5 boards and 4 assists. But, again, it was the big three in how they played. It just, absolutely made it clear that, it just was way too different teams. Way too many different teams, or way too different teams, like didn't even deserve to be on the same court, which results in a 5-1 kind of thing. But for the Celtics, again, they just didn't have anybody to put the ball in the basket outside of that. I mean, when you're talking Fournier, here and there just on volume scoring, he'll get up there. But, Tristan Thompson, Romeo Langford's been such a disappointment. Marcus Smart here and there will give you some. Aaron Nesmith, Grant Williams, Peyton Pritchard, Jabari Parker. Like, I can't remember. This was a team, right? We said in the last podcast where I said up and down the roster, who's going to get you 12 points?
That was them and the Clippers.
Yeah, both. Like, yeah, who's going to get you? Who do you feel confident's going to go out and get you 12 points? Like, maybe Marcus Smart. Outside of that, I don't know. And that showed here. So, and then as they got defeated in Game 5, Boston went nuclear on a couple different thoughts in their front office. So, I think it was time for Danny Ainge to step down, which he did, is, kind of the czar of the basketball ops and GM department. for Boston. Again, I mean, I've been listening on the radio all week. People have been, picking apart his coulda, shouldas. And, famously, that's the thing with Ainge, right? Is, hey, he almost did this. He almost did that. Again, I think the good outweighs the bad. He did get them the 08 title and assembled the first big three, to put a stop to LeBron with Allen and Garnett, and then getting all those guys around him, Eddie House and all those guys that just were able, Kendrick Perkins. Those are some impressive teams. And then going, back to back against the Lakers. It was the 80s again. It was great because of Danny Ainge. And then even more recently too, I mean, let's not undermine the fact that they have Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum on the roster because of him. And, again, how the Brooklyn Nets swap, was handled and everything else. They got Jason Tatum out of that. And they even swindled an extra pick out of Philadelphia to do it when they knew, hey, Jason Tatum's way above everybody else to do that swap to go from 1 to 3, and they still get their guy, and they got another first out of it too for the Fultz deal. But the more surprising one was Brad Stevens, who's still a relatively young coach, but I mean he was there 8 years, essentially kind of going into the front office as like director of ops or something like that. They just kind of in a president of ops mold, and now Boston's looking for a coach. I mean, I did not see that coming, Martin. I mean, I think there were some people that were clamoring like, hey, this is, we might need to do this, but I didn't see that doesn't happen. I don't think if the organization isn't basically telling him to step back or we're going to fire you kind of thing. So what are your thoughts? Did that shock you as much?
Yeah, it did shock me. It shocked me that I don't know if I want to consider it a promotion or not, because he'll basically be the new Danny Ainge.
Well, it's not a promotion.
But it's like, I don't know. I wasn't expecting him to not be the coach next year. I thought with this year and also with Jaylen Brown being down, I don't think they would have beat the Nets with Jaylen Brown. But I just felt like, I was like, okay, so now they're looking for a new coach. And like, who's out there? Who are they going to hire? I mean, living out here in Ohio, there were some rumblings with his connection to Holtman, and I don't think that's ever going to happen. So it's like, who do you hire that can connect with Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown? And we're also in this new era where you can't do anything unless you run it by your star players. So who does Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown want as their coach? Like, I don't know who's out there. Obviously now a hot name. There's Jason Kidd, the assistant coach off of the Lakers, but it's like, who do you go out there that could take this team to the next level, and what moves do you need to make to go back to the Eastern Conference Finals? Because Brad Stevens was in the Eastern Conference Finals a couple of times these past couple of years, so it's like he wasn't a bust, obviously. Just couldn't get over the hump.
I think one of the perplexing things for me, on top of the Brad Stevens thing, is, I mean, dude just got signed to like an extension, I think, last year, and then a month ago it was rumored he was going to get $10 million a year over 7 to go coach the Indiana Hoosiers. And I mean, like, if we're at this point now, I'd be hard pressed not to think that he wouldn't be coaching Indiana right now, making buku bucks, going back to the college world and back home to Indiana. So that's another really weird wrinkle for me. But you're right. I mean, you got to run it in terms of their vacancy. It is what it is. They have a vacancy now. It's one of the most pressured spots to hold as a coach in this league, is being. I mean, you've got the Lakers and Celtics. I mean, since the beginning of time, those are 2 sought after jobs. Where you go from there, again, it's always usually take your top 3 successive teams in the East and West over the last 4 or 5 years and find me a killer assistant, basically, that nobody's heard of, who's implemented systems and kind of been doing the work behind the scenes. Or if it were a lesser team than the Celtics, then you do the recycled coach approach, right? You do the, hey, like Steve Clifford's now out in Orlando this week in the last couple of days. Like, oh, let's grab Steve Clifford. Not to say Steve Clifford might not be a bad option. I mean, that's a dude who's a really defensive mindset, and anything about the Boston Celtics, they're defensive-minded team, and Steve's known for that. But the other side, the third thing is, looking at the college ranks, and is this something where, again, as you've seen Mike Krzyzewski now, the opening, he retire, and, they've been kind of promoting within. Roy Williams' replacement was promoted within. Some of these big places. Is this where somebody, Boston goes and gets another college guy to kind of come up, like a Tom Izzo to come up for a couple of years or something like that, or former NBA player, Kevin Ollie, always been thrown around the last couple of years on and coaching vacancies. So I think it's likely they find an assistant on like the Miami Heat or something like that, or don't throw out something crazy like. Although I'm not even gonna say that Mike D'Antoni's too old, but I'm like, ooh, maybe there's something there. He got Steve along with the Nets for a little bit, and I bring him on, but dude's like 70. There's no way. We did this with John Beilein in Cleveland, and it didn't work out. Couldn't keep up with the schedule and everything else. So I think that's all but settled. But it'll be, in my opinion, it'll be an assistant from a premier team, maybe somebody on Imani Williams or something with Phoenix, or something along those lines. But again, nonetheless shocking. Doesn't make it any less shocking just to see that this is kind of where the Celtics are at right now. And as a Cleveland Cavaliers fan, I'm like, maybe this is the opportunity to sneak in and try to overpay to an extent, something that maybe they wouldn't normally consider. Like I texted our buddy Jeremy Young the other day. I said, all right, my hot take of the day, Colin Sexton and our first round pick, if it's a top 3, it'd be even better if it was number 1 overall. And a couple other assets here and there for Jaylen Brown. You get a 20-plus per game scorer in Colin Sexton, and finally a ball-handling guard that's going to stay on the court as opposed to Kemba. You get some lottery cachet to do somewhat of a rebuild or bundle into something else. And I mean, as good of friends, Jackie McMullen said it on a podcast this week, famous Boston Globe writer and with ESPN and stuff too, like, hey, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are really good friends. But like when you watch them on the court, they don't complement each other well, like as you'd expect for two dynamic wings. The ball stops a lot. They're definitely not a Kyrie Kevin combo by any means. They're not a Paul George, Kawhi Leonard combo by any means. So I don't know. Maybe I'm trying to dive in and like be the guy picking up the girl that just got dumped and like, hey, like come over this way.
Yeah,
I'll take it. I'll take you, Mr. Brown. We could use you in Cleveland.
We'll have to wait and see what they do. There is another NBA coach who is in the college ranks right now who I've heard his name get thrown around. That's Juwan Howard. I don't think he's going to leave Michigan, but that is also a person who has a lot of NBA pedigree as well. So, but I don't think he'd leave Michigan. But then again, money talks. Last series of the first round in the East, the Philadelphia 76ers over the Washington Wizards. We also said the max this would go is 5, and it exactly went 5 games on that. And I'm going to tell you right now, man, Joel Embiid, he was impressive. Tobias Harris was impressive. Seth Curry, Danny, like that was the type of performance. I was like, Philadelphia, if they made it to the Eastern Conference Final, they could challenge the Nets. Like I was impressed by Philly. And Washington, I didn't think they'd even be here. I thought they'd be out of the play-in, so that was a bad fault on me. But I just feel like they don't have any depth. There's Beal, Westbrook, and there's Robin, but that was their problem. They only have 2 people. What'd you think about this series and what you saw from Philly and Washington?
Yeah, I mean, there's like 4 pieces I really like on Washington. You've got Beal, you got Westbrook, again, Daniel Gafford, who they got from Chicago. He had 11.8 and 5.8 rebounds in the series. I love what Ish Smith brings to the table. Veteran Ish Smith comes in, pushes the pace, and you'll just come in and you're like, all right, backup point guards in. As soon as you know, all like 5'10" blown by you, and he's got a layup. Like it's phenomenal what he brings to the table. Like as a team, like again, going back to my Cavs, it didn't even have a backup point guard basically all year. That's a guy I'd love to come in to lead a second unit. So, I mean, you're right. Just not enough firepower. anytime your bench is, I mean, again, just young guys, but anytime you're like benches, Anthony Gill, Garrison Matthews, Cassius Winston, Chandler Hutchinson, Robin Lopez, like you ain't going to win much with that. I am, again, you always are one, Martin, to say, I appreciate the fight and the hustle and stuff and not laying down. And, Washington did get a game here, but again, just way too much for Philly. And what I loved about Philly was, Embiid missed a game and he's got that tear or a couple of small tears in his meniscus that he's going to have to play through. And he did play game one of the second round last night or yesterday, but Tobias Harris was huge. Like that's, to me, I mean, that's the Philadelphia 76ers success model, right? Is when you've got Curry and Harris going off. Yeah. That's a team you can talk me into. That's a team that I think could take, 2 games, maybe 3 games from Brooklyn, something like that in the right setting. But Tobias Harris was the MVP of that series, hands down. Just, I mean, guy was efficient in the mid-range game and attacking the basket. Just phenomenal all the way around.
No, agreed. I guess with Washington too, I feel like this is the same holding pattern with Mr. Bradley Beal, because where do they go from here? Do they finally trade Bradley for some assets that's always been talked about every offseason? Or do they feel like they have enough with Beal and Westbrook to get pieces around them to make a run in the East? Like, what would you do if you were Washington? Would you get rid of Beal or try and build around those two?
It's tough because I don't know that you can get rid of one without getting rid of the other. Because once you devalue kind of the win now mode with Beal and Westbrook, you lose cachet with the other. If you get rid of one, like the other one ain't having Russell Westbrook on a roster with a bunch of like 19, 20-year-olds ain't going to do anything. I mean, we kind of had that a little bit in Oklahoma City to an extent before the Chris Paul swap. But again, I think you almost got to do it in tandem, which you might, but I'm not sure off the top of my head what their cap situation looks like. Obviously, they're paying $1 jillion to both those two guys. They got Denny Avia, the Israeli in the draft this past year, who was injured for the rest of the season. I mean, he's going to grow. I love the way that young man sees the floor as kind of a combo forward who can fill it up, and not anywhere Luka Doncic by any means, but he's a guy who can shift speeds and kind of catch you off on the wrong foot and score on you, kind of thing. So I mean, he's very tactful in that idea. But I mean, short of them getting a big signing, I'm always a fan of peel the Band-Aid off now. You know what I mean? Like they can, and I don't think they're going to do that. I mean, at the end of the day, that's why fan bases hold on and overvalue their own players too long, is they want to win games. They want to put butts in seats. They want to make sure they're still making money, those kinds of things. And obviously it's not going to be a fun time when you move on from Westbrook and Beal. It's just not. But again, I'm not a fan of dragging things on any longer than I have to. So I'd entertain finally finding a home for Bradley Beal. And it could be, I mean, the team I keep looking at, it could well be the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah, especially
they get the Timberwolves pick this year. They've got Wiseman. You can package some expirings and maybe a future first using the Stepien rule. Can't be back-to-back years. Yes,
and Wiggins.
Yeah, Wiggins. I mean, you could do a package of Wiggins and Eric Paschall. Eric Paschall would be great. Add on, Wiseman is a good foundation center to, and along with the T-Wolves pick. I mean, I think you pull the trigger, man. If I'm Washington, if I can get 2 firsts out of it and I can get Wiggins and still, be somewhat competitive, to an extent, again, not the floor, and then I get Wiseman out of it too. Send it into the league right now.
Good. That's a good one on you. That's a good one on you. So with the East now semifinals, we got Brooklyn versus Milwaukee and Philly versus Atlanta. Before we do go out, let's just
let's finish up because we've already played one. We've already played two games in.
Yeah,
we've already played a game apiece in a couple of these. But let's let's look at that. The both East ones real quick. Who we see winning, and just recap of those games. Let's stay with the Sixers. Sixers down 1-0 over the Hawks, or down 1-0 to the Atlanta Hawks. Joel Embiid did play in that game. They came back close. I turned it off yesterday when I got that text from you, and they're like, "Man, I like to see this fight and everything else." Because I mean, they were up. They were just dogging them. Atlanta was.
They were almost down. They were almost down 30.
Yeah,
they were almost down 30,
and they lost the game by 4. So that makes me feel a little bit better about it. I mean, it was more the same for Atlanta. You know what went on. I mean, Trey had 35 and 10 yesterday. It was more the same than what they did to the Knicks. I mean, they just caught fire and were in fuego, man. There's nothing Philly could do. I mean, Embiid had heck of a game: 39 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists on basically one good meniscus. But I mean, this one, I don't want to overact because we've overacted before in the last series, but this is one I feel safe is going to go at least 6.
Yeah, definitely going to go 6 now since they have Atlanta got that win in Philadelphia. And Embiid, man, like he was falling, and the fact that they did come back. But Ben Simmons, I felt like he did not have one of his best games per se, and I feel like with Embiid compromised, he's hobbled, that Ben's going to really have to step it up, and he's going to really, because I personally, if I had a vote, I actually would have voted him Defensive Player of the Year, but he's going to really need to like hone in on Trey and be that superstar and say, I'm guarding him, I'm going to lock him down, et cetera, et cetera. And game two would be Tuesday because they played on Sunday. Is he going to be Tuesday or Wednesday? But Philly's got to win game 2. Like I'm going to go Philly in 6, but I don't like being down 0-2. Then you got to win 4 straight, and then you don't know which game Embiid just doesn't play. So I think they got to win game 2 and get home court back in like game 3 in Atlanta.
I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say the Hawks are going to win this series.
I don't think that's out on a limb, man. I
think that's on a limb because, I mean, there's more for sure's if I know that Embiid's going to play the entire series. Mm-hmm. I don't know that he's going to play the entire series. And if he doesn't play, I think you're going to see a lot more of the same yesterday. And between the two, I can't believe I'm saying this again, and it's just what we talked about with Nate McMillan and everything else. The Hawks are a better defensive team, man. They struggle. The Seth Currys of the world and Tobias Harris and Danny Green and what's left of Danny Green, like they're struggling to get out on those Atlanta shooters. There's teams that's not a problem with, like Brooklyn and Milwaukee will have zero problem with defending those guys and putting a lid on it. If they were to advance, but I think I'm going to go Atlanta here in 6. I think I want to see, I mean, again, personally, I'd love to see Philadelphia really take those next steps with and get back to the Eastern Conference Finals for the second time in 3 years, because they lost in that Game 7 Kawhi buzzer beater, right?
Yep.
But that might have been, I can't remember, that might have been second round instead of a third round series. But anyway, I'd love to see Philadelphia win, but I think there's a lot of question marks, and I mean Atlanta's just got gunslingers all over the place, and the fact they're playing such good defense, and Joel Embiid's got one meniscus. I mean, dude just dropped 40 and 10 essentially yesterday on one meniscus. And I don't want to overreact to one game, but man,
no, I will go Philly. I'll go Philly in 6, and just because Embiid is hurt. I don't know, man, because if they lose this one, where I really think they can make the Eastern Conference Finals, we really might have to revisit that. Should we break up the Embiid and Simmons thing? We really might have to revisit that, because before James Harden got traded to the Nets, I really felt like fully healthy, this could be Philly's year. But if they get upset by Atlanta, man, they really need to evaluate what they have, and they might need to start doing some moves as well. But I think the headlining series in the East Semis is obviously Brooklyn versus Milwaukee. And Brooklyn won game 1, 115-107. The game really wasn't that close as a score. Like when I watched that entire game, it was not that close. Also, James Harden went out the first game of game one. They've already said he's not playing game two. So, Evan, what are you thinking about this one? Like, can Brooklyn beat Milwaukee without James Harden?
Yes. Yes, they can. This one wasn't particularly close. Giannis had 34 in the opener, but again, just Brooklyn's got so much firepower. Like this one ain't going to be a sweep. It's probably not going to be a gentleman's sweep, but I think Brooklyn takes this in 6 games max. It doesn't go. I don't think it goes 7. I do. I think they take, unless something catastrophic happens with Kyrie or Kevin Durant. I think Milwaukee's going to be competitive. I think all these games are going to be somewhat close. But man, Brooklyn just got so much firepower. Blake had 18, just popping. He hit 4 threes the other day. Kyrie wasn't all that efficient, but still got his own 25. And he and Durant were almost identical, 12 for 25 for one, 11 for 26 from the other. I want Milwaukee to succeed. I really, really do. This is just a buzzsaw. And this is, again, for as good as the Cavs were in 2018, it was a buzzsaw with Golden State and Kevin Durant. There's just nothing you could do about it. Stacked up against any year, that Cavs 2018 team was better than the title year. They were just phenomenal. They set all kinds of offensive records in the playoffs, you name it. 3-pointers made, offensive efficiency, points per game, you name it. Just sometimes there's a buzzsaw in front of you. It doesn't mean your team's bad. Doesn't mean your team sucks. It just means your team doesn't have Kevin Durant. Like, it's just, you got to look at, it's same kind of concept in the 90s, but like times 10, because all these guys are on the same team who can ISO score like this. Those Cavs teams that went against the Bulls in the early 90s with Craig Elo and Mark Price and Larry Nance Sr. and Brad Daugherty. Those were some freaking good teams, man. They just ran into a buzzsaw called the Chicago Bulls. It's tough. I'm not saying we're there yet. It's only really year one of this big three in Brooklyn, but they're just firing all cylinders. I don't think they need James Harden to dispatch this team. And heck, Mike James, who bounced around a lot, that dude went all out the other day. 12 points, 7 boards, 3 assists. Journeyman kind of G Leaguer, and just came in and poured it into. Love what I'm seeing out of Nick Claxton too, with some quality minutes off the bench. I like Brooklyn.
Yeah, I like Brooklyn as well. I think I'm going to go Brooklyn in 6. With James being down, I almost wanted to say Brooklyn in 7 just because of the way I saw the Bucks play against the Heat. But seeing Blake Griffin play in game 1, I thought I was watching like Clippers Blake Griffin. Because obviously the Blake Griffin in Detroit was not playing like he is playing now. So I thought I was blind, because I was like, is that really the same Blake Griffin who came from Detroit, couldn't dunk anymore, et cetera, et cetera? And like, when those players are firing like that, and also I always like to shout them out when we talk about Brooklyn, freaking Joe Harris, who's just a freaking sniper. Like, offensively, knowing they can't be stopped, but we'll see how it goes with James Harden and Giannis. And I hope they make this competitive. I don't think Milwaukee's going to go down without a fight. So currently, then, your Eastern Conference Finals would be Brooklyn versus Atlanta, and mine would be Brooklyn versus Philadelphia, if the picks hold true on the East Coast. Anything else on the East Coast before we shift out west? I know there's some people who are waiting to hear some of our West Coast
ones.
Yeah,
let's swing west. Let's start with the series of the playoffs, in terms of news, in terms of can't believe that happened, but can believe that happened. That is Phoenix and Los Angeles Lakers. Phoenix dispatched LA 4-2. In the 2 wins for the Lakers here, let's see, they won 109, 102 in game 2. Then they won again. They were up 2-1 in the series, then proceeded to lose the next 3 games. So again, Anthony Davis hobbled at the end, didn't have much out of him. LeBron still dealing with the ankle thing. I'm not making excuses for him by any means. Still dealing with the high ankle sprain that really kind of kept him out for the most he's missed in any year whatsoever. That was clearly bothersome. But I did worry about, on the onset, getting Schroeder and Marc Gasol in the offseason. We all thought, man, just reload kind of thing. Like, they still don't have enough bench scoring. They still don't have enough consistency in terms of, just in terms of, putting the ball in the basket, like outside of LeBron and Davis. I mean, KCP will put it in, those kinds of things. Kuzma's just abysmal. They've got to somehow hope that they can talk a third big star into signing with them. I mean, all these guys are on, with the exception of like Kuzma, on relatively short deals that they could dump somewhere with a pick or something like that to clear cap space in hopes that, a big name opts out. There's not a lot of big names on the market, coming in next year, but they just had no answer for Phoenix, and Devin Booker and Chris Paul just continued what they've been doing all season. They were the number 2 seed for a reason. You saw contributions all the way around from, Jay Crowder, from Bridges, you name it. I mean, they thoroughly earned this series, and they knocked out the defending champs.
Way back when, before the season started, you and I both said that watch out for Phoenix. We said this before the season started. We said they're going to get in the playoffs and they could potentially go to the Western Conference Finals. We said that even before them playing a game. When we previewed this thing and we were like full guns, AD, LeBron, we also said if we both picked the Lakers in like 6, potentially it could go 7. We knew Phoenix was not going to be a tough out regardless, because they are super talented. So when AD went down, and when Phoenix won game 1, I'm like, okay, this is going to be a pretty long series. And when AD went down, LA stood no chance, because the 2 games that LA won, Anthony Davis was the leading scorer with 34 both games. And then when he went down, they had no chance. So giving us props, because we called out Phoenix before anyone else. And we also said this was going to be tough. I don't know why people thought that Lakers were going to win in 5. I was not seeing that at all. And
irrational.
Our last preview, as we talked about, if you're not a basketball junkie and you don't get to see Trae Young in the East, a lot of people did not know how good Devin Booker was now until seeing him on the national stage. Like, this guy is one of like the best like young basketball players we have in our league right now. And Chris Paul, man, everywhere he goes, that team just improves to another level. It's ridiculous. And we talked about injuries. Chris Paul was hobbled up too. So like, he had like the shoulder injury. I don't know if AD was fully healthy and Chris Paul was fully healthy. I think we both picked the Lakers. I think the Lakers actually pull it out. But Chris was also hurt too. And man, also DeAndre Ayton played well. Like, this Phoenix team really shocked the world if you weren't paying attention to them throughout the season. But I don't think it was that shocking to you and I.
No, I mean, we saw this when this team was assembled and they got Chris Paul. And that's just what Chris Paul does. Chris Paul's like adding the rock to, a franchise. Like, you're going to get a boost because of it. What a leader. Just scrappy player. His mid-range game, even in his age right now, is still on point. The weight, I mean, they joke with him being like, they call him the point god for a reason. I mean, guy just can distribute the basketball. I'm just amazed, and even his backup, Cameron Payne, was like out of the league, man. Like, he was like a third point guard for us on a rebuilding team like 2 years ago, and we're like, done. This guy comes in and like he's blown by LeBron with that high ankle sprain and his age, whatever the combo is. Like, there's no answer. He turned the corner on LeBron. He's at the hoop, just 90 miles an hour. I mean, you're right. I want to shout Monty Williams again, well deserved. First time. Obviously he coached some of those Pelicans teams with Anthony Davis. Obviously now he's on the other side of this series and has his first playoff series win. He's been impeccable in getting this team to mesh. And shout out to very, very recent GM champ, James Jones, who's assembled this squad and pulled off the Chris Paul deal, and has stayed the course to try to keep Devin Booker happy and not dwindling at the bottom of the West. And this is a formidable team. I mean, I have some questions about their depth to an extent, but as long as Chris Paul and Devin Booker there, I think they're going to give Denver a hard series, man. A hard series.
We talked about the Clippers previous night. The last podcast, we talked about who on the Clippers could confidently get you 12. We talked about that also in Boston. I think we should have brought that up with the Lakers, because if you look outside of LeBron and Anthony, Dennis Schroeder, who it looks like he did average 14, but he had that goose egg in game 5 when they lost by 30. I was like, this series is over. But besides Dennis, who was, I don't want to know if I can consistently count on him getting 12. You look at the rest of that roster, there's no one else you can consistently think could get you 12 points.
They're paying too much to Kuzma, Andre Drummond. People finally saw just how bad he was and how bad he is. I mean, I saw that in Cleveland. I mean, he was good with us to start the year. Then when everybody got settled in during the bubble, I think that was more advantage of, hey, just a big dude who can get buckets underneath. And they kind of got him figured out. And then he wasn't even getting buckets underneath anymore. He's not jumping as much as he is anymore. He's still gobbling up boards, but I mean, he's bad. I mean, again, we're talking about Andre Drummond, who can't even get you 12 points or 10 points. I mean, it's bad. But I mean, Matthews, McLemore, they benched Trez this entire series, basically.
I don't know what happened.
I don't know what happened. I want to say in general, he's probably good for their team. I mean, he played 12 garbage minutes in the end and scored on 3 of the 5 baskets he had and got to the line 4 times. I don't know what happened either. That's your 6th man of the year last year. I don't know how you just don't play him, but you're right. I mean, they're going to have to, and look at the free agent list. There's not a lot of folks out there who are like, holy crap, that's going to add something to this Laker team. Like, it's going to have to be LeBron recruiting behind the scenes to try to get somebody to opt out a year early, that kind of thing. And, I don't think if the Clippers get bounced in this next round, I mean, one of those 2 dudes, I think Kawhi can opt out.
Yeah.
I still think that's a possibility if they don't advance past this series. Like, that's the Lakers. That's like the Lakers' only hope, I'll be honest, is getting somebody like that. Because I just don't know where else they're going to get some consistent score. I mean, again, they paid way too much to Kyle Kuzma. That looked like a good deal at the time. But I mean, just patching in with all these buyout guys and into the bench guys like McLemore and Matthews that don't have it anymore. Like, there's just, what do you do with that?
I think a lot of those people are going to be.
KCP had 0 points in 15 minutes. Like, what do you do with that?
Yeah, the Montrezl
Markieff Morris isn't the better of the Morris twins. What do you do with that?
Really, I'm trying to look. I think only guarantee is Dennis.
What was that?
Is Dennis still going to be?
He has not. He's got a deal he needs to sign. He claims he's coming back, but that's potential money that they don't have allocated yet. They haven't been able to work a deal yet. I don't envy Rob Pelinka, and the long and short of it is I don't envy Rob Pelinka and trying to get more than one title out of this LeBron tenure with the Lakers. I mean, and that's kind of what comes with LeBron, right? You've got to overextend and get out all the assets to, get a guy or so. And we saw it in Cleveland too. Of like, at a certain point, you're out of room and you're out of picks. Like, there's only so much you can do. So, but that's for another day. We'll get into some of that in the off season. Let's switch over to the series just finished yesterday in a game 7. I told you I wasn't thrilled about calling this, but I did say Clips in 7, and it was Clips in 7. When they needed them to show up and it started back, I mean, that was a winnable game for Dallas in game 6. They lost by 7, 104-97 in game 6. And the first of the closeout games opportunities. And then they just got dubbed hard yesterday. I mean, Kawhi, mainly in that game 6, Kawhi Leonard just went off. And again, he had like 70-some points between the 2 games. He was the reason, by and large, they won a lot yesterday. They just, along with Terrence Mann, a guy that Ty Lue just rolled out there and said, young pup, I'm going to give you some minutes. In a game 7, kudos to Ty for stepping up and winning that game. I mean, I don't want to call him big game Ty yet, but I mean, he does have a pretty nice game 7 thing so far. You go back to that Boston series against Jason Tatum and LeBron, and then obviously 2016, we all know what happens. Again, it helps having LeBron and Kawhi Leonard on your roster. Don't get me wrong, that helps a lot. He's been blessed, but the Clippers did pull it out, and they've at least extended potentially, a breakup of the team to another series. So, Martin, thoughts on this series? Luka went off. I mean, he's just such a joy to watch, man. I mean, we were talking today about Porzingis being unhappy and feels like he's second fiddle as opposed to a co-star. Like, that dude just needs to get a reality check because this guy's phenomenal, and he's not. You are nowhere near in his atmosphere. You might be a good player, Kristaps Porzingis, but you are not Luka Doncic. You are not 75% of Luka Doncic.
Yeah, and for the people who remember the Knicks when the unit on the mouse. Well, as everyone who's listened to the L7C podcast, NBA ones, and if anyone in our messages knows, I am not high on the Clippers at all. I picked the Clippers to lose on this podcast last recording in 6 games. When they were down 0-2, I thought they were getting swept. I'm not going to lie. I can never forgive them from last year, but I was wrong. And there was a point in game 6 when I was sitting there and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be right. And Kawhi Leonard said, I'm going to ball out for Mr. Evan Debo so that he could be right, and gave Evan 45 and one of the great playoff performances we've seen in recent memory. And they pulled it off in 7 games. This is also the first series in NBA history where the road team won the first 6 games. Definitely wanted to note that out. But I think what I saw is what we were hyped about, I think would have been a year and a half ago, whenever the signing happened with Kawhi and Paul George to the Clippers. Like, what I saw in game 7 is like, that's what we wanted to see from this team to challenge the Lakers in the West Finals. And obviously we won't get this time because the Lakers are already at home. But there were players who stepped up from the Clippers who I did not expect. You already you hit on Terrence Mann. He stepped up. Another one who made shots in game 7 was Luke Kennard. Like, he made shots, and he was not good in Detroit, but he made some shots. Reggie Jackson stepped up, and you want to talk about, we said who could get you 12 consistently, and you saw Kawhi average 32 in this. Paul George,
pride of back to Luke Kennard, the pride of Middletown, Ohio. Luke Kennard.
That is true. But Paul got you 23. Reggie Jackson got you 15. Mark Morris got you 11. Nicholas got 9.3, and then see the others, but it's good on them. I felt they were the better team in the end, but with the Mavericks, it really did remind me, maybe just because we live in Ohio and we watched maybe 1 billion Cavaliers games. It reminded me of, I don't know which particular year, but obviously reminded me of those old LeBron James teams where it's just like, you just don't have the firepower. It'd probably be the year before they beat the Pistons for the first time, where they were taking those Pistons with Chauncey Billups and them to like 7 games and then get blown out in the 7th game. But Luka Doncic showed why we picked him to be one of the top 2 MVP candidates before the season started. The dude was just out of this world. And I think my biggest thing with Luka is that he would score a lot in the first half, but then like the second half, it was just like night and day. And obviously Kawhi started guarding him, which now we have the talks of why people said Kawhi was potentially the best player in the NBA or the best two-way player. But for me, good on the Clippers. I still don't believe in them. I'm not picking them. I'm already going to say it right now, I'm not picking them to win the next series. Just they got to keep showing me before I pick them. But
Me either.
I think Luka, I think the Mavericks, Evan, when we go to offseason, is going to be a team we talk about a lot. Because what do you do to build around him? I mean, Tim Hardaway, he had 17, but he wasn't making shots in game 7. And Kristaps, he is a shell of his former self. And it's like, who do you go out to help them? And I think that's going to be a team we talk about a lot in the offseason. But Clippers, for everyone listening, I eat crow. You prove me wrong. We'll see what you do next round.
They proved you wrong temporarily.
Temporarily.
The
explosion show. I had notes ready for the explosion show on the Clippers. I had the timeline of when everyone got signed, everything. But
just file that away maybe for like another week and a half. We might be coming back to this. We'll see.
Oh man, but that was a very entertaining.
They proved us wrong for a week and a half or so. So Trailblazers. So Denver dispatched Portland again, struggling to make it too far in the playoffs. In 6 games, they take the final game 126-115. Lillard just phenomenal throughout the entire series, but alas, coming up short again. Martin, what did you see in this series? Obviously, with Denver, it's the Jokic conversation. It's the emergence of Michael Porter Jr. Again, they don't have Jamal Murray right now, but Austin Rivers stepped up huge. And again, that dude was like out of the league for like a couple months. Nobody like jumped on signing him for some reason when the Knicks bought him out. What did you see? Obviously Denver went to the West Finals last year. What did you see from Denver? What did you see from Portland? Just thoughts on the series.
Another thing, counting us out again. We said if Jamal Murray wasn't hurt, we thought about picking this team to go to the final, like even with the Lakers, because they're stacked. But I want to start with Portland though, and if you've watched, these two have actually met in the playoffs a couple of times. If you remember Portland's run to the Western Conference Finals, they upset what are their names? Denver Nuggets back then in 2019. That was before the bubble. But I'm just looking at these stats, man. Like Dame averaged 34. I didn't even know CJ averaged 20. It didn't feel like it. Norman Powell averaged 17. Nurkic averaged 13. I felt like he needed to be more aggressive, especially going against the Joker. I felt like that was one of the things. Our guy Melo averaged 12. So you had 5 guys average double figures. And then Robert Covington was at 9.3. I just felt like
that's a defensive problem. It's the same mode. They can't play a lick of defense. I mean, all these teams we've talked about to this point of, man, they'd kill to have a guy who can go out and get them freaking 11 or 12 points a game, like reliably. By all means, they've got it in Portland. They are disinterested in playing defense. Whatever reason, the scheme didn't work, and ultimately, right at the end of the series, just as what happened with Boston, Terry Stotts is now out as the head coach in Portland. And I really, really like Terry Stotts, his offense and everything else. I mean, that could be a guy. I wouldn't be surprised if Terry Stotts is a guy who could end up with that Boston job, just how he handles superstars and stuff like that. But again, they just can't play defense, and Denver burned them this series. Every game was high scoring.
It was game 6. Was it? Yeah, it was either 6 or 5 where I texted you and I was like, Michael Porter Jr. This is why no back injury.
He was the number 1 pick in high school.
He was going to be the number 1 pick in the NBA draft. And the fact that Denver has him, and he is showing what he can do. So, and they don't even have Jamal Murray. Like, And I know it aggravates me, and I know it aggravates you because he could have been in the state of Ohio. But goodness gracious, this dude is a freaking baller, and he's getting better and better. And the MVP of the league, Joker, man, I wish Jamal Murray was on the team playing right now because this team could win it all. I'm going to say it. I think they could.
Am I crazy? Am I crazy to say, though, that, like, I mean, Murray's been inconsistent all year, even when he was playing, that, like, if that was the standard, if we take Murray this year, are they missing a whole lot with what they're getting out of Austin Rivers right now?
That is true.
It hurts. Don't get me wrong, but that just shows you how much Rivers has stepped up. And on the playmaking side, how much Jokic has stepped up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think they're absolutely going to likely beat Phoenix. But, I think that one's going to go 6 or 7. I don't want to keep copping out and saying it's going to be 6 or 7 for all these series, but they don't have 8. You've got Ayton, but who's going to contend with Jokic, man? That game 5 you mentioned, where as good as Porter was, defensively too, to shut down everybody else other than Lillard with a playoff high of 55 that game and that overtime loss
at the end of regulation and
double overtime,
double overtime.
Portland's got to learn to play defense. They've got a Norman Powell's a free agent. So is Gary Trent that they just gave up for. So that's going to be a huge spot to try to get him re-signed. I like the Norman Powell fit out there. They've got it. There's some wiggle room. You can move around some stuff. They definitely overpaid for Covington. I think they got to move on from Nurkic. They got to continue to tweak the roster here and there. And who knows? Maybe Lillard will finally say enough's enough. I need out. And then you're looking at trying to move him somewhere, where there's another swap him for another superstar that's disgruntled or wants out, or, there's maybe another blockbuster deal to be had somewhere. So who knows? But nonetheless, Denver, again, who we've had going far, it advances. I feel bad for that Trailblazer Rip City fan base. It just every year it feels like it's a first or second round exit. But nonetheless, they will advance to play the Los Angeles Clippers.
We've watched teams where we know their ceiling. Like, I really felt like 2019, that was the ceiling for Portland, making that Western Conference Finals. I really feel like that is the highest they'll go. Like, I don't think they'll win a title with the team currently.
With McCollum and Lillard, they will not.
And I've seen rumors and stuff about talking about, like, Karl Anthony Towns to Portland, which he's a good player. I don't know how much that would help them. But when you talked about Dame saying enough, potentially, he hasn't said anything like that, potentially saying enough's enough, and him going with another superstar. I'm going to throw this out because we mentioned them earlier. What about a swap with Jaylen Brown for Dame and have Dame go to Boston? Would be teared up with Jason Tatum. And you send Kimba with them as well. How do you think about that? That could be a potential thing.
I don't know that it'll be only if he puts a gun to their head do they trade him. They're more likely to do McCollum for Brown. But that's the beauty of the NBA, right? Is because there's so many teams that I feel like are in that situation where, like, they're not going to win as a group. They're not going to win as a tandem. Like, Portland's one of those teams. Washington's one of those teams. Dallas now with Porzingis, like, somewhere in there, you can have some musical hats of some players just to see if the fit's better. I could see, and then you got some interesting third-party teams that have some talent. Potentially they could ship somewhere else. Like, I could see Kevin Love, always been rumored to get to Portland. Obviously, that's an absurd contract. It's likely not going to happen while he's still under this contract. But whether it's like a McCollum, Beal, Wiggins, Porzingis, like somewhere in there's a couple trades to just shuffle the hats a little bit, put the shells over top of the over the ball and shuffle them around like at a baseball game you see on the Jumbotron, and just see what comes up and fits where. Like, I think there's definitely room there for for a move there. And I'm with you. I don't know that. I mean, at a certain point, you got to look hard and say, this sucks to do, but McCollum and Lillard we've done everything we can around those two. Like it's just not going to win in this state. And obviously they want to keep Lillard. They're motivated to keep Lillard as the better of the two. McCollum's a heck of a player, but I think there's room to shift some stuff around here or there. So Martin, let's move to are we on the last one?
Yeah, we're on the last one. One more thing.
Yeah.
I don't know why people Dame Lillard is not going to the Los Angeles Clippers.
No, he's not.
Any mathematical, financial, I don't see any way that happens unless you're trading like Anthony Davis, which you're not doing. So I just want to get that out because I'm tired of seeing the photoshops of Dame in a Lakers jersey with LeBron and AD. Unless you literally are playing 3-on-5, that ain't happening.
If he were a free agent or could opt out, that'd be the case. But he's under contract, and Lakers have nothing to get this done, so it ain't happening. You're right. It's just people bored with Photoshop and Instagram trying to get clicks. Like that's all it is. I mean, don't get me wrong, that'd be fun. And maybe they're teasing this. I'm not sure when Lillard's contract expires. Like if it expired next year and you could opt out a year from now, something like that. Then I see why Jason Kidd was like, yeah, I don't want to be the coach over there, knowing full well that Lillard might be willing to come to Los Angeles. Like that you could do something like that. However, that ain't in the cards in the next 12 months and the next 14 months. Let's put that to bed. So speaking of put to bed, the number 1 seed in the West in our final first round matchup, Utah Jazz, put away the scrappy Memphis Grizzlies, 4-1. Obviously, the Grizzlies won the play-in game and they came out and took game 1 right off the bat. Then it was 4 straight by Utah. Obviously, Donovan Mitchell didn't play in the first game. He played in every game since. And I mean, every game was not close. It was almost, with the exception of game 4, was double digits. So John Morant continued, like you said, with some of these other guys. If you haven't seen Booker, if you haven't seen Beal and stuff, you've heard of these guys. You know they're good, but you don't know how good they are until they're performing in the playoffs. In a playoff series. And I mean, John Morant was phenomenal to the tune of 30 points a game and 8 assists. Really excited to see that young man continue to grow. He's just so young, and the sky's the limit. But nonetheless, Utah advances. They will move on to face the embattled LA Clippers. Martin, notes on this series at all?
Donovan Mitchell would have played game 1. This would have been 4-0. I'm sorry. Like, we've watched Memphis all year, especially at home. They are almost unbeatable as teams at home besides that game 1. And the team, man, they got 6th man of the year, Jordan Clarkson, who's made great improvements. And like Donovan, Conley, Gobert, Royce O'Neal, Jordan, they have Joe Ingles, like they have a squad. And I don't want to say too much. I do want to switch to Memphis. Okay, John Morant with Dylan Brooks. I mean, the sky's the limit, as you said. Like the dude, first playoff series? I don't even know if he's 21.
Yeah.
Oh, he is 21. 21 on the dot. Averaged 30 points in his first playoff series.
They're like Denver. They're like Denver before the. They're like Denver like a year ago, like when. Or 2 years ago, when Porzingis is injured and it's just one dude and a bunch of scrubs, and how far will the one dude take him up with a very young guy? I see a lot of. Did I say Denver? I meant Dallas. I'm sorry. Yeah, Dallas. Yeah, I mean it's like a Dallas Mavericks situation type thing. They're like a year behind where the Mavericks are, but I mean this is the future of the Western Conference. LeBron ain't getting any younger. Kawhi and those guys, they could be in East for 2 years from now. I don't know. Just the way some of these guys swap teams and stuff. These guys are Luka, Ja. They are the future of the Western Conference. Donovan's still young too, but man is this Utah team impressive. I am taking them to beat the Los Angeles Clippers in this next series. They're way more fundamentally sound. They've got way more depth than what the Clippers just faced in 7. If that's a good transition point. Again, I don't want to belittle the year that Memphis had to get to this point. They're 4 games above 500, 38-34. They average 115 in the series. Again, it's just one of those things where it's just Ja by himself. Phenomenal year by them. They'll continue to grow. They'll continue to try to put talent around Ja, and they'll always be defense-minded, a defensive-minded team. But moving into the second round, if that's okay with you.
Oh, yeah.
Utah hosts the Los Angeles Clippers, a 1-4 seed, tomorrow night at 10. I likely will not be up for that, although I might be. We'll see. It just depends on the day. The Clippers will need Herculean efforts from Kawhi and Paul George, who hasn't really provided. I mean, Paul was good when they needed him to be, but or George Paul, as you call him in text threads. But I just like Utah's depth. I like what they do defensively. They got so many different ways to fill it up. I'm going to take Utah in 6. I wouldn't be surprised if it's Utah in 5, Martin. I'm feeling jazzy today.
Oh, well, I'm picking the Jazz too. I'm picking. I would not pick the Clippers in the title, and the next year I'll pick. But I am taking Utah. I mean, all the issues that they had was guarding Luka, and now you're going to have to come guard Donovan Mitchell. And if you guys don't know, he is only 24. He is coming as well. And as I heard today on the radios and on First Take, Donovan Mitchell has a whole team. And I don't want to belittle that Dallas, to me, didn't have any veteran leadership, while the Utah Jazz has veteran leadership in our guy, Mike Conley. Like, I think they're going to beat them. After watching that series, I think the Jazz will beat the Clippers in 7 games. And then the explosion, the Clipper episode will happen.
And then the explosion of the team will happen.
Oh, that is part of the episode, because that team will get blown up. And that's what I was going to bring up to you, too, about Kawhi. I've seen things, if they would have lost that first round, people were potentially thinking about Kawhi going back east and going to Miami. I don't know if they have the money or cap space or whatever for that, but
they make it happen somehow.
I was like, that was interesting. But yeah, man, I'm taking Jazz too. We'll see if the Clippers can prove me wrong yet again. Now, the other series, though, I'm still trying to think in my brain.
I'm torn. You going Suns?
You got Devin Booker, Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton. You got the Joker, Michael Porter Jr., Austin Rivers.
Let me frame it to you this way. I think if you ask me today, I'm going Denver to win this series, although I don't feel confident in it. However, look at Phoenix. Now, granted, 2 completely different teams. Phoenix plays defense. Look at Phoenix with the 2-guard action, and look at Portland with the 2-guard action. And I'm seeing a lot of comps, and I'm seeing this kind of end in the same result. Now, granted, Phoenix is going to defend. DeAndre Ayton is way better than Nurkic. Bridges is way better defender than whatever the Olay defense is that Carmelo Anthony's doing, because he's only interested in playing offense. We all know this. But I mean, Denver's depth, Denver's length. I mean, I think it's going to be probably the most entertaining of the series, of any of these series. I think it will be. I mean, we all know Phoenix is going to be a tough out. I could swing somewhere else tomorrow. That's how close I feel like these 2 teams are. But I mean, as of now, I just see way too many similarities in kind of the construct of that 2 combo guard kind of action that you have in Phoenix to what you have in the Portland set, and how easily Denver dispatched them, man. That's kind of where I'm leaning right now.
I'm going to go Denver and 7. So I got 2 7-game series out in the West.
I hope so. I mean, we always say there's the 2 words in Game 7. I mean, there's a reason why this is so exciting. There's a reason why it's everything. And the sport of basketball is to get to that point. And I hope, for fans' perspective, that we get there. I hope we do. It's been again a really informative first round series. We've learned a lot about where teams are, where they're not, what they might be doing in the off season, how they have the reset button, who might advance coming here into the second, into the third. Like, it's just an exciting time to be a basketball fan as we know it.
That would give us, if it holds true, the Nuggets and the Jazz in the West Finals, which that would be a very interesting matchup. There were some tad bit things I forgot to mention when we were recording. Obviously, with LeBron and them losing, LeBron 14-1 in the first round. That was his first round.
It was his first exit.
Just wanted to throw that out there, make sure we got that in. But I don't know, Evan, I'm liking the NBA playoffs. Like, I've been super into it. And a question I do want to ask you before we do sign off here today, because we both love basketball, but there's been radio stuff about, like, because this is also the first time in the NBA Finals won't have LeBron or Steph Curry. So what do you think that does for, like, casual fans? Because I like that we're going to have a new NBA champion this year. I really do. So, and if it's not Brooklyn and it's not Kawhi, it's going to be a new star emerging themselves to the mainstream. So what do you think about, like, not having LeBron or Steph in and new faces? People finally get to see these young guns.
I mean, I hope we're heading that way. However, I think we are going to have. It's highly unlikely we won't have Kawhi on one side, although you and I both picked against it this series. But that's a bad example. I think it's highly unlikely the Brooklyn Nets are not in there, and that affords you star power. But what you said is valid. I mean, we've had an entire generation of fans. I mean, in the last from 2012 to 2020, we've had 4 LeBron titles. We've had 3 Curry titles, right? Yep, 3 Curry titles in there. We've also had 3 Kawhi titles in there, or potentially this would be the third. If he were to come through somehow and pull off a miraculous run, and it's one, and he's capable of that. I don't know. He is capable of that. This would be the third since 2014. You're right. It's exciting to know, like we talked about with the different moving around pieces. There's that much talent in the league. There's a lot of parity. It's exciting for basketball. It's exciting for a fan. But I hope if you're a younger listener, a younger fan of the game, or you know somebody who is, that, you know, we're talking up the next generation, because at a certain point, the LeBrons and the Chris Pauls are going to be done. As much as it seems weird to say that, because they're just immortal, it seems, at this rate. And the Devin Bookers are going to be here. The Bradley Beals are going to be here for forever. And we're going to have some great matchups with those guys, and continue to see that with Dame Lillard and everything else. But you're right. That's a valid point. But I expect Brooklyn to be there, and we'll get the star power from that. There might magically be all those Golden State fans that were Miami Heat fans might be Brooklyn Nets fans by the end of this. I won't be one of them. But there are that type of fan out there, and I could see it going that way.
Brooklyn does win, that would also be from 2020. That would be KD's third.
Yes.
And Kyrie's second. But it would be James Harden's first, which would be a very... Because then if you put an NBA title next to James Harden's resume, you're like, whoa.
So what happens when you assemble monster juggernauts like the Brooklyn Nets are, and I see them steamrolling the East, man. We'll see. I mean, the Bucks are going to have a lot to say about it. I think the Bucks will have a lot more to say about it than the winner of the other series, but this is their toughest test getting to the finals, is this series. So we'll see.
Anything else that we missed, Evan, before we sign off here?
I think that's it.
Yeah, we did a lot of...
Covered it all.
Evan, do you have any final words before we sign
out? I just hope... my last thing is I hope we get to see a lot out of Joel Embiid. I hope he doesn't tear something further, and we get to see that be a series. Dude's just so good. I mean, he'll likely be number 2 or number 3 in MVP this year. Again, injuries are going to be an issue when you're that big and you've got that much brute force to throw around on those knees that, you know, it's tough. But I just hope we get a healthy Joel Embiid for the series.
Yeah, my only last thing besides the usual, thank everyone for listening. Subscribe, like, comment on anything you listen to. Just want to touch on it a little bit. Fans, calm down. Stop running into the crowd. Not the crowd, to the arenas on the game
Stop
floor.
it.
Stop spitting. Stop throwing water bottles. I mean, it's just giving a bad look. I don't want to equate because we've been inside because of COVID. That's no excuse for bad behavior. And these aren't even like little kids doing this. These are full grown adults doing this. So just be better. That's the only thing I ask. We have, as Evan has stated, we have fans in the NBA arenas, and it is great for the playoffs. So don't ruin it for us watching at home and your other fandom. So just know how to behave. That's all I have.
Stop running on the court, people. It's not that hard.
That hard. And with that being said, thank you everyone for listening to the L7C podcast. You guys take care. Thank you for listening to this episode of the L7C podcast. Be sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe to the channel. Follow us on all social media platforms, and we'll be talking to you guys soon. Take care.